Good evening and welcome to an unscheduled Tysky Sow. We know it's unscheduled because it's with me, Aaron Mastani, not Michael Walker. But we are here because a huge story has emerged this evening. He's gone. Matt Hancock, the Secretary of State for Health, has resigned after he was revealed to have had romantic relations with an aide, which breached government COVID guidelines. Now, we knew that yesterday. That was the lead story for a great show that we talked about yesterday, but now he's resigned. And in the last half an hour, Matt Hancock himself has posted a video on his Twitter account. Let's watch that now.
I've been to see the Prime Minister to resign as Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. I understand the enormous sacrifices that everybody in this country has made, that you have made, and those of us who make these rules have got to stick by them, and that's why I've got to resign. I want to thank people for their incredible sacrifices and what they've done. Everybody working in the NHS, across social care, everyone involved in the vaccine programme, and frankly, everybody in this country who has risen to the challenges that we've seen over this past 18 months. I'm very proud of what we've done to protect the NHS at the peak, to deliver that vaccine rollout, one of the fastest in the world. And I look forward to supporting the government and the Prime Minister from the backbenches to make sure that we can get out of this pandemic. We're so close to the end, and then build back better so that this country can fulfill its potential, which is so great. And I will do that with all of my heart.
So we were getting all the government lines there about build back better and the country's potential. So clearly agreed with Boris Johnson and number 10, you would imagine. Hancock wrote this letter to Boris Johnson offering his resignation. That's now live. You can see that on Twitter. Let's just pull that up. The most interesting parts, we'll go to those now. Here's a quote from Hancock. The last thing I would want is for my private life to distract attention from the single-minded focus that is leading us out of this crisis. Suggests it's not particularly acrimonious between him and Boris Johnson. I want to reiterate my apology for breaking the guidance and apologize to my family and loved ones for putting them through this. Apologize for what? Being caught? I also need to be with my children at this time. I bet you do. We owe it to people who have sacrificed so much in this pandemic to be honest when we have let them down, as I have done by breaching the guidance. Again, you were caught. If you hadn't been caught, you wouldn't be saying all this. This, for me, was kind of the most remarkable thing of the whole letter. This is the second graphic 2B. I'm so proud that Britain avoided the catastrophe of an overwhelmed NHS, and that through foresight and brilliant science, we've led the world in a vaccination effort. So we stand on the brink of a return to normality. Now, look, we do stand on the brink of a return to normality. The vaccine effort has been fantastic, but 130,000 people died. I mean, it's a really strange thing to say. The NHS wasn't overwhelmed because 130,000 people died. Is that the reason why it wasn't overwhelmed? I mean, again, that has clearly been written in league with 10 Downing Street, one imagines. The letter finishes by saying, I will, of course, continue to support you, Boris Johnson, in whatever way I can from the back benches. I would like to thank you for your unwavering support, your leadership, and your optimism, particularly as we work together to overcome this awful disease. Now, this letter, like the video, has just been focus grouped, I think, right? I mean, it's just a remarkable letter, a bit of public relations management, effectively. There'll be one more thing I'm going to say, actually. Sorry, this is from Boris Johnson, graphic 3 to Matt Hancock. You should leave office very proud of what you have achieved, not just in tackling the pandemic, but even before COVID-19 struck us. Very stage managed, the whole thing. Looks like a highly choreographed means of ensuring that Tories don't take a major hit from what's happened. It's about mitigating the damage. Let's go through action. This is from Keir Starmer. He tweeted this pretty much straight away. It's in the last half an hour again. Matt Hancock is right to resign, but Boris Johnson should have sacked him. Interesting. I sometimes feel like I'm being overly unfair on Keir Starmer, so we'll hold back for 1 second there. This is from Angela Rayner, a bit more substantial. If we can just get this up, the Angela Rayner tweet, the deputy leader of the Labour Party. Why did Boris Johnson back Matt Hancock? Why did he say that the matter was closed on Friday, yesterday? And why didn't he have the guts to sack him? Boris Johnson has demonstrated that he has none of the judgment, ethics, or leadership qualities required of a prime minister. A bit more substantial than Keir Starmer, like I said. This is from Novara Media's very own Ash Sarkar. Screwing the country won't force a resignation, but kissing an aide will. This is from Ali Milani. Things that didn't cause Matt Hancock's resignation: herd immunity strategy, national PPE shortages, delaying first lockdown, the failure of test and trace, highest COVID death rate, 130,000 plus. Things that did cause Matt Hancock to resign: kissing an advisor. And then finally, this is from Lily Allen. We've not got these, but it doesn't matter. I'll go over it anyway. There was a great tweet from Lillian. He's not poor enough. When the story came to light yesterday, the Met Police will not investigate Hancock for breaches of COVID laws due to it being retrospective. So we've got a bit of reaction there. You've got the story, clearly highly choreographed, stage managed. It's about ensuring the stories don't take a major hit. The response from the opposition is that it's not really showing adequate leadership, that the fact he's resigned, he's been allowed to step down rather than him being fired. I'd like to know your thoughts on that. I mean, clearly all the time you do have people who are forced to resign and they're not fired. It's a face-saving exercise. Should Boris Johnson have sacked him instead of allowing him to resign? I don't know. But what I think are the sort of two crucial stories that I want to talk about this evening, it'd be great to get your sort of thoughts and feedback in the comments, is one, what does it mean that Rupert Murdoch can effectively, or a Rupert Murdoch publication, in this case The Sun, can effectively release a video and reshape a whole political career, can basically get a Secretary of State for Health in the middle of a pandemic, we're still in the pandemic, get them kicked out? What does it say about Britain that one media owner has so much power, and that Secretary of State for Health doesn't go after 130,000 people who have died, doesn't go after it's found that there was a huge failure when people with COVID-19, older people, were sent from hospital back into elderly care homes, effectively acting like a mini biological weapon? That's not enough to do them in. What is when Uncle Rupert wants them gone. Because it's important to say this video, which has now been released, it hadn't been released yesterday. We'd seen the stills yesterday. The video, you do not want to see this, was published, I believe, earlier on today. This video was published by The Sun, and of course the political editor of The Sun is Harry Cole. Harry Cole is the ex-boyfriend of Carrie Symonds, who is the wife of Boris Johnson. So the fact this has been published in that outlet under Harry Cole's name, like I said, the political editor, would indicate something strange and choreographed is going on. And the fact also that yesterday the government said they wouldn't be going any further in terms of trying to work out where it came from, who leaked it. Again, that should be very strange because it kind of undermines, potentially, you'd imagine, national security. In any case, there's clearly lots of ad hoc stuff going on here. People are making up as they go along, which doesn't really confirm, cohere, is congruent with the rules, generally speaking. So that's the first question. Rupert Murdoch has all this power. How on earth, politically, is that possible? And I suppose, how do you respond, really? And then secondly, Matt Hancock, you know, he's gone, but like we're saying, for all the wrong reasons. He's gone for all the wrong reasons. Now, what we were hearing a month or two ago was that Boris Johnson wanted him to stick around. This is coming from Dominic Cummings. And of course, his take on this will be very interesting. Boris Johnson wanted him to stick around because he would be the person who would effectively take the blame for the catastrophic failure of public policy in 2020, last year, in terms of how the government mishandled the crisis. That had a lot of impetus and momentum because, of course, like I say, there was that story about older people going into hospital, having COVID, suspected COVID, and then being allowed straight back into elderly care homes. And of course, I think the best of my recollection, about 40% of COVID, 30% of COVID deaths can kind of be connected to that effectively, right? Older people tending to be in elderly care homes. And again, you know, I can't recall the exact numbers, but when this story came out about a month ago, I mean, some of the stories, some of the anecdotes were just remarkable. You know, somebody had gone into hospital, then went back into an elderly care home. And these were stories that were on BBC Radio 4, on the Stay programme or whatever. And they would say, because of that person, 6-7 people subsequently died. Now, of course, they're in later life, you know, but they could have lived 3, 4, 5 years. And of course, it's important to say the manner in which they died, really, really sad. You can't say goodbye to your loved ones. People probably thought they had a few years to settle their relationships with other people, get things sorted before they pass away. That was taken away from them. New health secretary is expected to be announced tonight. We've got a super chat. Here from Nishat with £19.99. As a doctor and as someone who has lost family and friends to COVID, I'm disgusted that Hancock resigned over an affair and not the thousands of deaths, or thousands of avoidable deaths. Starmer, as usual, useless, calling for resignation over an affair. I mean, I'm sort of inclined to agree. I don't want to say, Keir Starmer is useless, but I found that a very strange tweet. And it's important to remember Keir Starmer wasn't calling for his resignation in regards to the care homes crisis. I suppose also going forward, it does ask a really big question, which is if Matt Hancock can't be trusted on adhering to the very guidelines he himself has said that the public must adhere to, if he's somebody who's lied to his wife and his 3 children, to what extent can we believe his account when it comes to COVID-19? People say, well, Dominic Cummings is a liar, Boris Johnson is a liar, they make things up. But if it turns out in 3, 6 months, a year's time, 2 years' time with the inquiry, that their testimonies say something which puts Matt Hancock in the doghouse, I mean, it doesn't really feel like he's a particularly credible person anymore, does it? Just my thoughts. Nick Gussett with a $5 says, thanks for doing some overtime. Is this time to bury the bad news of the 20% increase in COVID cases in the last 24 hours? You know what? I have no idea, and it's a great question. We do have to take account of the fact that we joke about people on the left having sort of 5D chess strategies, but there can be very intelligent ways of shaping the political conversation, which are done at an elite level through things like this. And like I said earlier, clearly there's an element of cooperation between the Sun newspaper and 10 Downing Street. And now there's an element of cooperation in the manner of his resignation between Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson. So I don't think it's implausible that there's clearly a level of coordination about all of this. However, the cases have gone up. Okay, they've gone up 20%. Is that it? Would you really would you wield the sword of Damocles over the Secretary of State for Health over that story? I don't think you would. It would have to be something bigger. And I'm sure the Tories would, by the way. But it's a good hypothesis, isn't it? Gina Coladangelo, that's how you say it, is leaving her position on the board of Department of Health. Kind of interesting. I mean, it's a shame we probably can't get those pictures up. Maybe Fox can find them. This is the problem with a last-minute show. You haven't got a script. But the picture of Coladangelo leaving her house, putting all the things in the back of a 4x4, very Chelsea, very Tory. But I also I saw a tweet and somebody said it reminds me of being dropped off at Halls. Quite funny. I want to hear what you guys think in the comments. And I will get round to any more super chats. Satnav says, hidden camera. No way a married man would do that knowledgeably under a normal CCTV cam. The way he looks around that door and then closes it and then does what he does, I do agree. It looks very odd. It could be staged. But then also you have to remember, Matt Hancock is a very strange man. Next, where does that footage get stored and how does the Sun get it unless it's all a plot? Blaming the resignation on this affair and not giving him her job, spherical objects to the lot of them. Great £10 super chat here from Matt Egg. Rubbish opposition means rotten government. Starmer out. And I think this is obviously a much bigger story than the by-election in Batley and Spen next Friday. And we shouldn't just reduce everything to electoralism. This is about a failure of government in the biggest public health crisis in a century since the flu pandemic in 1919. But, this is a bigger failure because we've got the technology to actually do something about it. But, I also think it's probably fair to say that the rapid response of number 10, the sort of resignation by Matt Hancock before Monday. I mean, we talked about him resigning yesterday, but it was all, it was all speculation. This is clearly very decisive. The video's out, the letter's out. Less than 24 hours after we were talking about it. It does feel like there is an eye to the by-election next Friday in Batley and Spen. Really big by-election, because if the Tories win that, it does suggest that, if there's another general election in 18 months, 2 years' time, they will take more seats from Labour. I mean, almost certainly. That's kind of looking priced at the moment, what with boundary changes as well. So it's a huge, huge by-election. And you have to remember, before the Hartlepool by-election, which the Tories won by 7,000 votes, there was growing pressure on Boris Johnson, actually. I'm not a huge fan of the Politics as True Crime podcast sort of methodology, which has been adopted by people like Paul Mason and various other people online. This weird idea that 2 months ago Boris Johnson was going to go to prison, and that Keir Starmer was needling his position in PMQs, and he'd managed to prize out Boris Johnson lying, and this was going to be the final axe on Johnson's political career. Obviously, it's ridiculous. However, there was clearly growing pressure, and that by-election took that pressure away. I think if they win in Batley and Spen, the Tories, that is, I think clearly there's going to be a huge drawdown in pressure on the Conservatives, and it's put back in the Labour, part of the court. And I think there'll clearly be calls, I think quite rightly, for Keir Starmer to resign. So, yes, I think they're definitely doing that with one eye on the by-election next week. This is from Jeremy Corbyn. Matt Hancock should have resigned over the Serco contract, the care home deaths, the PPE disaster, and the treatment of NHS workers and carers. I think ultimately that should be the response of the leader of the opposition. Of course, Keir Starmer can't do that because just last week on LBC, he was eulogising the vaccine programme. He said what a fantastic job the government has done. The watchword for all of 2020 was that Labour supported the government and that they didn't think now is the time to call for resignations. Of course, the only time they did that was with Dominic Cummings. He did call for resignation with regards to Hancock, but over this, not over the issues that Jeremy Corbyn is talking about. Scott Duncan tweets on the hashtag Tysky Sour, really tells you something about a country when the last 1.5 years of balls ups, definitely plural, leads to zero accountability, but a soap opera style tabloid frenzy sends them into a PR face-saving sacking. Lovely way with words. Completely agree. I think it does tell you something quite important about the state of British politics. And like I said earlier, the fact that somebody like Rupert Murdoch can just change the political conversation like that, just drop, the sort of political equivalent of a dirty bomb. And he can just, change what we're all talking about. All 65 million of us in this country are talking about, not all 65 million, but everybody involved in the political conversation, the realms of what we think matters change very quickly. And clearly that's a limited thing. Here's a super chat here from Tamara Law, £5. Thanks, Tamara. There is a better way of running a society. These people have become far too comfortable, entitled, and out of touch. We need a true democracy. I think that's so true. And I think also it's important to say there's a better way of running a media. And that is not just a segue to say, like and subscribe to the channel. They should do that too. But there's been talk for years now of how the political power of Rupert Murdoch on The Sun is in decline. I think that's inarguable, massively inarguable. They were selling 3.5 papers every day. I think quite recently, 10, 15 years ago now, it's below 1 million. It was the biggest selling newspaper in this country from the mid-'80s until I think last year. It's been overtaken by the Daily Mail. So it's not as powerful as it was, but clearly we have major problems. If still in his 80s, Rupert Murdoch can make and break political careers like this. I think it tells us something really, really important. We have got, let me see, we've got 2,400 people watching. I would carry on all day if I could, but I think we'll probably wrap up in 5 minutes. Let's take some comments. And where we go from here, I guess, is quite an important question. I suppose the big lens to talk about for this is the by-election next week. If the Tories somehow lose that, I mean, my God, what a confluence of strange factors. What a confluence of bizarre factors for that by-election. Keir Starmer under pressure. He's not particularly liked. I was in Batley and Spen. I wrote an article about it for Novara Media. Check that out at novaramedia.com. We talked about it last night. I think Labour are going to struggle. I think Labour are going to really struggle. And what was really odd in Batley and Spen was that when I went there, I could see barely no Conservative Party literature whatsoever. Their bet was, of course, this bet was made before George Galloway turned up. They just need to not, in the words of George Galloway's election agent, they need to not screw up and they would win. And obviously some strange stuff is now happening, right? George Galloway is clearly eating into the Labour vote. Could what's now happening to the Tories be a variable in them not winning and Galloway winning? I mean, I might look ridiculous next Friday. He might just get 5,000-6,000 votes, which will clearly change the outcome, right? It's a huge number of votes, but he won't win with it. When I was there last week, they were saying, last week, yeah. They were saying 16,000 votes would be enough to win it, in their opinion. They thought it's going to be a turnout of 40-50%. There were 16 parties participating, so 16,000 gets you over the line. Stories like this might mean that the Tory vote doesn't turn up. Could be. So a lot to think about there. We've got a comment here from Johnny G. Galloway is a Tory. He's not a Tory. You can say he's Galloway is an attention-seeking fraud. You can say that. I mean, he's not a Tory, right? I think it's a really important point. He's a social conservative. He's said a bunch of things that people disagree with. I thought what he said, for instance, on Julian Assange was outrageous. He's got really troubling views on LGBT rights. I think Michael talked about this really, really assertively last night. I think he needs to really say, look, my rival is an LGBT woman. This kind of rhetoric is not acceptable and so on. But he's not a Tory. I mean, he voted Conservative in Scotland. That's what people say. But he's not. I mean, he's just not a Tory. I don't think the policies he talks about or his views on foreign policy are Tory ones. I think it's important to say, I think the person's a shyster, a charlatan. I think they're a liar. I think they're in it for themselves. I think they're here today, gone tomorrow. That's fine. You can say all those things. They really matter in politics. He's not a Tory. We're going to wrap up in a second. Any chance Lib Dems can win? They do have a councillor in Cleckheaton, which is part of the constituency, but absolutely not. And I'll finish with this, actually. This is a really important quote here. Corbyn has brains and principle. The mainstream media will never allow that combination to gain power. And I think that's an important place to finish, because Jeremy Corbyn was so widely derided by the media for so long. Not just the fact that he's unelectable, he has all the wrong ideas, has bad policies, but also how he communicates as a politician is obviously ineffective, and he's not very good at it. You look at his tweet in response to this, and to me anyway, I mean, what do I know? Politically, it seems a much more powerful response than what we've seen from Keir Starmer, which is just one line. In the words of a lady I spoke to in Batley and Spen, wishy-washy. And that's how Starmer comes across to the electorate. I think we're going to wrap up there. Come and join us again on Monday. Michael Walker will be here as usual. Hit and subscribe for that. We had 2,300 people watching on a lovely summer's evening. So I'm very grateful for you all tuning in. You've been watching Tysky Sour with me, Aaron Bastani on Novara Media. Good night.